Hey guys, welcome back to the Results Junkies podcast. Paul is back from Lubbock. I did not make the trip, but we are going to recap that in some detail. We're going to talk a little bit about a concept being discussed on a new podcast and something that we had talked about here on the show a while back in terms of who's got all the usage right now and what the investments actually look like going into these large AI models. And if time permits, we're going to talk a little bit about the underground race to buy up training data. Mr. Singh, welcome back from Lubbock. No trailer this time in Lubbock, but
no trailer this time. Yeah, no, it was a great trip. I'll tell you all about it. But yeah, no trailer this time. I flew in and out, and it was cool. I'll tell you all about it. But I also
isn't it easier with planes? Just saying.
Sure. Yes. The answer you're looking for is yes, but it comes with its own challenges. I'm going to sound like a privileged dude here. I guess I am a privileged dude, but I'm going to sound horrible here. But it's like,
this is great.
You know, for better or for worse, I've always flown United, and boarding group 1, I never think of it. I just get on the plane and I don't think about it, right? And then because of the way the timing of the return worked, I had to fly American on the way back, and it seemed like a great airline, but I didn't have status on it. And I did not realize that American has 9 boarding groups. I got, boarding group 6, and when you're sitting way back there, It gets tight real fast.
Yeah.
But I realize how I sound right now to anybody that's listening to this. It was a great trip. But how are you? You're looking a little rougher than usual today.
I'm upright for sure. I threw my back out shortly after I bailed on Lubbock. The two were not related. I had to bail because our daughter's senior night for track got postponed. Missed out on Lubbock, but and then I also threw my back out and have been struggling to do much of anything. I've been working standing up in the kitchen. My wife is thrilled that I built an office complete with 30-something inch screen monitor in the middle of the island in the kitchen. And I will say I apologize profusely because had I been with you, we would have been on the same flight home. And at a bare minimum, you could have boarded with me in Group 1 as Executive Platinum on American. And I think there was a reasonable shot I could have pulled an upgrade out of a hat for you. So instead, you were probably in row 32 in a middle seat. And I'm truly sorry for that, for that, the damage I've caused to your psyche.
I was actually in row 28, and I had a horizontally gifted man to the middle seat to the right of me, and I had a very vertically gifted man in the seat in front of me that could not get comfortable. So a lot of squeezing going on there. Thankfully, I was in an aisle seat, and I could overflow into the aisle. But
big spender. Did you pay for that seat?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't actually know. I just booked it.
I bet you did pay for the seats. I mean, airlines are really good at tying that stuff up.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it was a good trip.
It was nostalgic because I saw your pictures and I'm like, I remember doing stand up in that same room that you guys did. Was it A Million Cups in that morning?
And
I remember doing it in that same room. 2017?
It was 2018. Actually, almost 6 years to the day. Really. I mean, well, it's technically 6 years and 2 months. But yeah, when we went there, it was January of 2018. And that building, the Innovation Center there at Texas Tech, had just opened up. It still had, I don't know if you remember, but it still had finishing tape on the walls. They were building that thing out. And so we'd parked the trailer there. And so, yeah, actually, let me just tell you about it real quick. So went back and got to spend a little bit of time, with a couple of the different, actually, let me just pause for a second. One thing I'll just say is that I don't do well in the academic setting. I know I'm not that articulate sometimes. I know I ramble sometimes. But I don't think there is any group of people that get more infuriated with specific words than academics. And this is not a reflection or something about Lubbock, but just universities in general, because I don't know whether to call some of these people like deans or faculty or staff or administration, but God help you if you use the wrong term. That being said, it was an interesting trip. I'm going to talk about the entrepreneurship side of it as well, but I did get to spend some time with people on the administration and sort of the faculty and the professors and stuff like that. It was really neat to just kind of meet them as well, and kind of see how they train the health sciences students, how they train their engineering students and all that. But on the entrepreneurship side, what was really fascinating is that, what you and I saw 6 years ago in terms of the office hours we did and all that, that was their first cohort. That was their first attempt to figure out how to help entrepreneurs that were coming out of that university.
Yeah.
And by the way, for people that don't know, Texas Tech is a pretty large university. I mean, it's like 45,000 students, and it's, out there in West Texas. But man, so 6 years later, that building's still there. It's packed with a lot more people, a lot, full of events and stuff like that. In between all those other events, I got to do office hours with 8 of the companies in their current cohort. And I'll tell you the names privately afterwards, but I'll just say that it was super interesting to see how much more sophisticated they've gotten in 6 years. So there's actually one of the companies that I'm going to introduce you to. I'll send you their deck afterwards and see if you're interested. But I think there was at least 2 companies there that were crushing. Like one of them is bootstrapped, did $300K in revenue, I think their first year last year. And I told them, I was like, look, this is against my own best interest here, but I don't think you should raise money. And we spent the whole office hours. I just gave them a playbook, do this, this, and this.
Yep.
And I think they could be doing $1 million to $3 million in revenue this year if they just focus on those things. And then on the other side, the company I want to introduce you to, they also are about the same age in terms of a company history. More of a SaaS thing, but they understand their metrics. They've got revenue. They're hustling in the sense that they're growing. They're talking to potential clients every day. They've got like sales pipelines. And actually, they're just about to close their safe round. I mean, they've already wrapped up I think there's only $50K left in $1 million round.
And you're going to tease me and not tell me anything about either of these companies live. You're going to wait for me to come find you later.
I'm going to tell you afterwards because that way you and I can close our deals if we're going to do them before this episode goes out. We'll see. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is 2 of those 8, that was just 2 of those 8. And it wasn't, and I'm not suggesting that the other 6 weren't good. I'm just saying that you know how it is when you talk to accelerator companies, there's sort of a distribution of, companies that are now on the other end of the training or the what's the word, like the schedule. And anyway, they're just a little bit more mature. And the other 6 companies that I met just need a little bit more time. They maybe had 1 or 2 customers or were just about to close their first. So, I guess what I'm just trying to say though is that it was probably it was just eye-opening to see how far they've come in 6 years, but also it was just refreshing to see real businesses actually making money. And I say that with respect, by the way, but
and further proof of something that you've said a number of times, which is you can grow a company from anywhere, not just from Silicon Valley and the other coast.
Okay. Yes. All right. Tasha, I can't think of her last name right now, but Tasha Williams. Anyway, the person that's in charge of the innovation hub there is named Tasha, and she's super great. And all those programs she's responsible for, and her team's responsible for. And the running joke while I was on the ground there was that I was really just trying not to get Tasha fired because of the things I was saying. But this one of the other interesting topics that we talked quite a bit about there at the university, particularly with the administration and the faculty. And again, academic people don't murder me. Just I don't know what the right word is. But even the president of the university was sitting right there with us for this stuff. And one of the things I was saying to them was look, I think American university systems have gotten extremely, extremely good at extracting value from the innovation side of what they do, which is the majority of what they do, right? So they promote research, and then one of the many things that comes out of that research is patents, right? And then there's a tech transfer. All that, right? And if we think about the amount of money the American university system makes off of those kinds of things, it's massive. And one of the things I was trying to convey to the administration, the president, and everybody there while I was there was look, I don't know the first thing about innovation. I just imagine that what happens in those labs at Texas Tech and at George Mason University, at Johns Hopkins, I imagine it's smart people tinkering and working late nights and looking for that eureka moment. And that's really important stuff that I'm not qualified to do. And I said, you guys as a system, like a whole country of universities, have gotten so good at then extracting value from that. And that's how, that's why the dollars are so big in the education system. And so I say all that because I kept saying, I'm on the other side of that coin, which is the entrepreneurship side.
Right.
And I started privately with them, I started showing them the actual returns that we've gotten. We like Dana, and I said like, look, I actually had a spreadsheet that I tried to show. I was like, look, here's a company that returned this much money in this much time. And here's the university I found them at. And what I was trying to convey was I said, like, look, the end of my keynote was essentially, look, you guys as a system, not just Texas Tech, but everywhere else, you guys as a system of universities have figured out how to successfully capture the value of all the research and innovation that occurs on university grounds. It's amazing. Imagine if you could then also add to that this idea of being able to capture some of the entrepreneurial stuff that's happening, as it leaves your universities. So those two companies I just told you about, that I hinted to you about or whatever, those companies right now have received no money or no equity funding from Texas Tech. Or to say it a different way, Texas Tech actually has no ownership of even one share of the ownership of those companies. And if those companies go on to exit, Texas Tech doesn't get to participate. And so I think there's just a really big opportunity there. So anyway, I know I'm being super inarticulate there, but it was a really good visit. It was really, really cool to just see how far they came. And I got a lot out of it selfishly too, because I got to kind of see how the school systems work, and particularly on the healthcare side, it was interesting to see like how they train doctors and PTs and all that stuff. So,
well, it's funny because you talk about healthcare and medicine, and I actually think that's probably the one area where universities do a better job capturing value out of those things. And it's everything else that I think gets glossed over.
Actually, that just reminded me. Do you remember that table pounding moment I had in?
I think it was Fort Wayne.
Was it? Yeah. You remember that? Okay, so the one thing you should be sad about is that you missed something like that in
what?
In Lubbock. And I don't know that Tasha listens to this podcast, so she probably won't.
Yeah, I can send her a copy.
But
was she in the room for it?
No. So there was so the very similar table pounding moment is that there was a guy from the health sciences side of the school. And a long story short, he was advising one of the startups that I met in office hours and stuff like that. And anyway, I happened to run into him in the hallway, like after the office hours or whatever. And now, to be fair, I had had a long day, and to be fair, I don't know him that well. But, when he introduced himself to me, I was like, I guess I was a little bit of a smart ass. And I said, "Are you the guy that told that team to do X?" Like, I'm being a little vague because I don't want to give it away and make him feel bad. But anyway, he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you think you're..." So like, let me just set this up. I'm going to give you enough context so but I also don't want to give this away and make anybody feel bad over there. But here's the thing. So there was a team that had a physical product that had a medical component to that product. And from my perspective, that product was ready at least for pre-orders. Even if you couldn't deliver it, at scale and bulk, it was ready. And so I asked the team point blank. It was just me and the team in the office at that point. And I said, "Okay, so when are we..." They had, you've got 152 potential customers right there. You say you got on the list. When are we going to go give them purchase orders and see if they actually follow through? And the team was like, "Well, our advisors are telling us like we should wait 2 months or whatever." And I was like, "That's an oddly specific number. Why is it 2 months?" And anyway, it's because their mentors told them, "Oh, well, we got to like figure out the cogs on this thing or whatever." And so the gist on this I was like, "I don't think you should do that. Just go get the purchase orders and we'll figure out the rest." All right. So anyway, I go and run into this other person later on who I guess turned out to be one of those advisors that was telling these people this thing. And I was feeling a little spicy, and I was 3 cups of coffee in, and it had been like, 10-hour day already, 12-hour day already. And I met this guy. He said, he introduced himself. He's very polite. I was like, "Oh, you're the guy that's holding that team back." So immediately this conversation was not going to go well. And so anyway, he said what he had to say. I had to say what I had to say. And I said, "Look, we're both arguing for no, like," I was like, "Let me just kind of give you an analogy." I said, "Do you understand I'm not a healthcare professional?" He says, "Yes, that's obvious." And I was like, "Okay, thank you." And so I said, "If I went to one of your patients and told them how to prevent a running injury, would you agree that I'm not qualified to tell them anything or give them medical advice? And he said, yes. And I said, exactly. So like, you should stick to giving advice on the stuff you know about, which is the medical, the part of that product that is specifically related to the medicine that it works with. And anything else that has to do with finance, legal, structuring of the business, whatever, you're not qualified to talk about that. And you're just arbitrarily giving these people weird milestones to wait. And for what? And anyway, it was just, I know the delivery was horrible for both of us, but yeah, that was, you missed that part. So now I've instilled a little bit of FOMO in you for the next one.
Man, I haven't seen one of those in years. In fact, that one from Fort Wayne might have been the last one.
Yeah. Well, I try to keep my temper under control, but I think the thing is, though, is that like, I think that the vast majority of people that give entrepreneurs advice mean well. I know they do.
Sure.
Like people are trying to help. It's a good thing. I get it. But the reality is that I think it's hard as an entrepreneur because you especially when it's your first time, you don't know who to listen to. So you sort of listen to everybody. And I think the real challenge, I think, for people that give advice is to understand that we should really only be giving advice on the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and that's really hard. But like, you and I know, like I'm not qualified. You and I are not qualified to give advice on a particular product. Like, for example, if somebody was making cell phone cases, like
right.
You and I buy one cell phone case. We can give you opinions, but our opinion doesn't really matter. But you and I, on the flip side, see enough e-commerce companies where we could say, hey, how much of your daily revenue is attributed to email? Okay, well, I can tell you based on what I've seen across the industry, like whether you're above average or below average, So anyway, it was just really neat to see how far Lubbock's come. I think one of the things I said to Tasha before I left was like, hey, if you've been able to do this with a cohort size of 8 or whatever it is over the last, they're on cohort number 6 or 7 now. So 40 or 50 companies. I was like, I think you should at least think about what it's going to take to double or triple the cohort size. Because with a population of 46,000 students, surely there's more opportunity there.
Yeah.
It was good. It was really good. Totally understand why you couldn't make it, by the way. But now you'll have to wait another 6 years for another table flip moment.
Man. It's not fair. Those should come along more often.
Oh, well. All right. So you're into new podcasts now. I don't know how to take this. I thought you would just listen to our podcast because you love it so much. But
I wish I could, because I don't think Apple Podcasts actually gives you a number. I'm just going to look real quick and make sure. Or here, I try to follow one new podcast. I was doing one new podcast a week, and now I'm doing, let's call it one a month, and I try to pair them out of the app at times. But yeah, there's no count in here, but man, I subscribe to a lot of podcasts. I always want to hear what people are doing. I want to see what people are doing differently for shows. And so I picked up a show called BG2. And we've talked on this show about both of the co-hosts of BG2. It's Brad Gerstner and Bill Gurley, both prominent investors in this space. I've seen both of them speak at various times at conferences a number of times. Most recently, I saw both of them at the All In Summit last year, and I think Bill Gurley gave a great speech about regulatory capture and stuff like that. And he said something that we talked about probably 5 or 6 weeks ago on the show that I think is interesting. He has further evidence that a lot of the large investments that are going into these large AI models. So, for example, Microsoft's investment in OpenAI, those investments are largely credits for operating on their platforms. So, Microsoft, Amazon, and then potentially, some of the same stuff with some of the stuff that Google's doing with some of the companies that they're acquiring. And so it brings up this interesting philosophy. And we were talking about this a little bit in pre-show, but whenever we think about the ecosystem, you and I talk about all the time, we're funding people at the bottom of the ecosystem, or maybe the bottom, but the nascent end of the ecosystem. We're giving companies enough cash to get started and see which ones catch fire. And then there's another mezzanine above us that invests at higher numbers and pushes companies further and further and further until ultimately they go public, or there's some sort of large acquisition into a public company. And in this case, with AI, what's happening is because these folks are buying up and Bill and Brad didn't go into this in detail, but what I'm hearing them say is these numbers are getting bigger and bigger. What I'm reading about these numbers of these credits getting bigger and bigger, especially because these folks control so much of the GPU markets that are out there because of what they're buying up. They're really playing kingmaker here, and it's, they're picking the ones that they think are going to be the best of the best, and it's going to be that much harder for an investment that you or I make at a $25, $50, $100, $200,000 level for them to get the sort of compute that they need to build their models.
Yeah, I mean, I'll preface this by saying that this sort of behavior has been happening for, I don't know, longer than probably you and I have been alive. In other words, the big do kind of get bigger.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Like when I first started angel investing, I was looking at the web traffic of companies that were hosting with me. And then because I had a relationship with their sales or with their infrastructure team who maybe, became my customer, I'd, ask for an intro to whoever it was. So I'm not saying I was like cheating. I wasn't doing anything crazy. But the point is, though, is that like I had it. Let me say this a different way. Investing in the private market has always been about the asymmetry of information and the asymmetry of infrastructure. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it's always been in like every industry too. But what we're seeing now, though, is at a scale I don't think we've ever seen before in the sense that, this is like one of those pivotal moments where like I guess what I'm just trying to say is, look, going back to the data center example, for example, it's really hard to corner the data center market because there's so many different types or companies that can manufacture servers to put into those data centers. So you can't really corner that. So back then it was really just a race to kind of get them as big as you could, as fast as you could, because like speed was really the only moat. What we're seeing now is super unique because the manufacturing capabilities and the know-how that is required to create these GPUs is so specialized and so unique that really only NVIDIA has figured out how to do this at scale faster than anybody else. I mean, Google does have like their T4s and other stuff like that, but by and large, NVIDIA is the dominant player. And the fact is like the big guys, the Microsofts and everybody else, well, the crypto people kind of cornered the market and were buying all those GPUs for a long time. And we talked about this on the show like 2 years ago. And then it wasn't until Ethereum switched over to proof of stake that all of a sudden the crypto guys are like, okay, we don't need these anymore. They offload everything. They cancel the orders. And then it just starts to open up. Market opens up, and I can finally see GPUs, even low-end GPUs, available at Best Buy again. And then all of a sudden, AI starts coming out, LLMs start coming out, and boom, they're off the shelf again. And here we are with the biggest players just buying them. I wish I had this article handy to put in here in sight, but I saw an article while I was flying the other day that, Microsoft is talking about building $1 billion GPU farm. $100 billion GPU farm. Not $1 billion, but $100 billion GPU farm. And that's on top of the fact that they're already spending, it's known that they're spending millions of dollars in terms of pre-orders with NVIDIA. So
yeah.
Anyway, I know I rambled there, but I'm not refuting what you say there about the king making. I would just want to say that like this behavior is not new. I am curious. Not that this is a political show, but I'm curious. Like, I do think that one of the reasons why large M&A has really slowed down is because of the fear of antitrust and, DOJ. I mean, like, when the whole Canva Adobe thing, right? Like if I remember right, got killed at least publicly because of the antitrust implications of that, I believe.
Figma, yeah, not Canva, yeah.
I'm sorry, Figma, yeah. And so it's like, is there a day you think? So here's the question for you. When we think about antitrust or whatever, we think about, in broad strokes, we think about like, monopolies that a consumer would face. And what you're talking about in terms of like the king making and all that, this is a potential monopoly that developers and entrepreneurs might face. I'm curious if you think there's ever a point at which maybe there's government intervention here if this sort of infrastructure gets too consolidated with a few key players.
It's a broad question and a good question. I don't think that there's a specific government entity that's equipped to slow this down today. So I think that's first and foremost.
That's right.
So like when you think about some of these deals that have been stopped by the DOJ, that's through merger where, I think when we think about large public companies that are also well run, what you end up with is, it's sort of like I like to say, and I think I've said this on the show before, a company, I can make money in a high tax environment. I can make money in a low tax environment. I can make money in a lot of different environments as a business owner, as long as you tell me the rules. And so it's when there's uncertainty for corporations that it gets harder. And so not to get overly gushy about Microsoft, but I think Satya, their CEO, is a very intelligent man. And I think they have good leadership at the board level. And I think they realize that they are probably board locked from mergers. And when I say use the term board locked, it's sort of like a chess term, or we use it in sports betting and all that stuff, but essentially means like you're out of moves. And so the government isn't going to let Microsoft acquire the next big company. Like the Activision thing happened, but I think I was surprised that happened. So, bring that full circle. Well, Microsoft still needs growth. And so the C-suite has to figure out how they're going to have growth, because if they don't have growth, then the stock price won't grow and investors won't be happy, and, virtuous cycle or invirtuous cycle. This is essentially, if this bet works for Microsoft, this is essentially them, quote unquote, potentially merging with OpenAI or acquiring OpenAI. And they're doing it in a way of using that, not only their balance sheet to do it, but they're also using their balance sheet to block competition in a way that allows them to continue to expand. And so what you're talking about, the government slowing this down, and I don't want to sound overly critical politically either, I'm not sure the technical know-how exists in the government to figure out how to slow it down if the government did want to slow it down. Because I'm not sure how you'd attack this. There's no law against Microsoft investing billions of dollars into OpenAI via credits and blocking smaller investors from being able to get GPUs. There's nothing that even comes close to it in the current structure.
Yes. Right.
So, there's a long cycle there to curb this sort of behavior and this sort of growth.
Yeah, it's and by the way, I sort of agree. I love that statement you said earlier about, like, right now there's no government entity that is equipped, even if they wanted to. There's no government entity that is equipped. I think historically it's just sort of been the market, whatever that means, the market that sort of stabilizes that. But this is just entirely new territory now. We've never I'll just use construction as an example. There's never been a scenario where one rental company could buy up all the cement mixers in the world. Right. And constrain construction everywhere else, right?
Yeah.
But we're talking about, these GPUs, for people that don't realize it, like, these GPUs really are the pickaxes and the genes of the proverbial gold rush, right? Like, you've got all these startups and companies trying to go after. The other thing, by the way, that's really not new, but I think also worth just making sure people understand what's happening here and notice, is that, it is, from a financial standpoint, really smart what Microsoft and some of these other players are doing. Because, I think you said this earlier, but I want to just highlight it, is that they're investing their dollars to buy equity in these AI companies, but with the condition that those dollars go right back to their own GPU platform for compute.
We'll take it and even more granular there. Like, they may not even necessarily need to put out the dollars, because if that compute wasn't going to be 100% utilized by another paying Microsoft customer, Microsoft has already committed the balance sheet fortitude to buy that GPU. And so if it sits empty, come on, they're not 100% utilized. So even if they're 99% utilized, that's a 1% write down on whatever they're giving free credits on to OpenAI. Right. But they're probably more like 50 or 60% utilized. So if they say they're giving $1 billion in credits, their actual cost is probably half that. And then you've got tax advantages because they're using the tax code to write off the GPUs. It's like, it's a very, very savvy way to block out your competitors.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of, how do I say this? Like, it's sort of I think what a lot of people think of,
it's a massive
it's a moat.
moat.
Yeah. And I think, what's kind of funny is when people talk about the PR industry, or, when people think about, like, the venture industry and stuff like that, I imagine that most people think it's like the bro culture of high fives and hugs and all that stuff. But the truth is that it's really ruthless. It's sharp elbows and, winner take all. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, we all, if you ask any sort of early stage entrepreneur, like, how do you envision venture? What they always talk about is like, oh, everybody wears a vest. Everybody kind of is in Silicon Valley. Everybody kind of helps each other and da. And while that may be true somewhat, the fact is that as the stakes get bigger, the sharper the elbows get too, right? Like, Microsoft wants, to your point, they've invested all this money in this infrastructure. They've got to capitalize on it somehow. And, could they potentially acquire more and more of these companies? Probably. But then you got to think about that whole antitrust stuff. Yeah. So why not just take some of your profits and your cash off your balance sheet, take a huge equity stake in the companies that are already using your infrastructure and funnel that money right back into the compute. And this is what private equity, for example, has been done. I mean, I guess here's my summary of this particular topic, by the way, if we just abstract it away from GPUs for a second.
Yeah.
What's happening right now is that corporates are acting like private equity. Like, what we're seeing here is what private equity-backed companies do in terms of roll-ups is what corporations and their corp dev departments are effectively doing now. And they're bypassing, they're not doing anything illegal. They're just, by doing it this way, they're bypassing those antitrust concerns. They're also probably getting a better effective tax rate while also boosting their overall revenue, right? Because I'm sure some finance person somewhere could say this better than me, but this is kind of like they're killing 10 birds with one stone here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's amazing and terrifying to watch it all happen.
I would agree. All right. So I'm curious, do we have another tour stop?
Yes. Asterisk, because in this moment, I don't know what it is. I need to catch up on my calendar and my email and everything. You're catching me 12 hours off the plane.
Oh, stop being a sissy. I'm on planes every week.
Oh man, I don't know. I was wondering how you actually get all this stuff done. I feel like I'm always behind the ball here.
Oh, I don't. I definitely don't get all of it done. That's the key.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I feel like.
Do you want me to show my unread email icon to you to make you nauseous again?
Oh boy, we can. But I here's the thing. I can't show you mine because I just delete stuff. I'm like, if I haven't responded to it in a week, I guess I'll just I just declare email bankruptcy about every 7 days, and I'm like, somebody will email me again if they need it.
Oh, you're killing me. You're killing me. I used to have an employee that did that. She doesn't work for me anymore.
And that's how the podcast ends.
Yep, that's where it's going to end, man. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your week.
It was a good ride. Episode, whatever number this was, is the final episode of the Results Junkies podcast. And the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back was not the 2 sticks of wood that Ed picked up this week to throw out his back. It was me telling him that I delete emails when he doesn't address them directly to me. So there you have it. Mic drop.
I should just stand up and walk off camera and let Jeremiah figure out.
No, we get a hobble off now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm not getting up, because it would be ugly. I'm gonna need a few minutes to brace myself and crawl that way. So.
Oh man. Well, I hope you feel better.
Yeah, it sucks getting old, man. It's
the worst. Like I was telling you in the pre-show too. It's the worst part of it is not the pain, which is awful. It's the fact that it was it wasn't like some manly story you can tell. It's not like you were throwing around 60-pound bags of cement. It's like,
no.
I picked up a stick and the wind hit me hard.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
I've been there.
Yep. Sissy factor on full display for everyone here. Except I'm not standing up while on the show, because then it will be a full display.
Well, now I got this visual of you standing in your kitchen. I've been to your house, so it's like I just have this visual of you standing in your kitchen, and your house just, the main floor of houses, they echo. I just imagine you standing there on that island with your whole setup, and you're just bellowing into your phone, and your family's probably walking around with earmuffs on all day now.
They're pretty excited about it, yeah. And so, I'm in about 45 minutes, I'll be back there, because after we stop recording, I'll slowly start trying to move out of the chair and get the spine to work again. But I'm gonna be here for a while.
The visuals are great. Yeah. I should get you one of the what's that chair that goes down? That goes down the staircase.
Yeah.
Just get you kind of riding back up that thing.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you.
I love it. Hey, so if anybody does get this far in the episode, if you want free office hours with Ed,
Yeah, right.
go ahead and fly into Dulles.
Yep.
I'll get you his address, and you just have to agree to wheel him around the house in a wheelchair, and you can talk to him about your startup.
Love it. All right, man. Have a
All
great
right,
rest
man.
of your week.
I hope you feel better.